Welcome. My name is Rachel Kimmer-Bussell. I'm the editor-in-chief of Residence 11, a website and community that celebrates sensuality, romance, intimacy, and loving in a new age of human connection. You can find us at residence11.com. And in advance of our first live event happening February 11th, the Desire Summit, the Residence 11 Desire Summit on sex and relationships, we're speaking with Lasara Firefox Allen. And if you don't know, the Desire Summit will be held in Los Angeles in person, which we hope you can make it, and also live streamed around the world. So if you're not in LA or can't make it in person, you can watch along with other people around the world. You can go to summit.residence11.com to find out more. So I'm going to tell you more about our guest, Lasara Firefox Allen. They, them, MX, is a writer, witch, nonprofit executive director, and coach. Having grown up in the wilds of Mendocino County, Lasara currently resides in Oakland, California, in the ancestral and contemporary lands of the Ohlone people. Lasara is a social work practitioner who practices from an intersectional and anti-oppression focused feminist framework. Follow Lasara on TikTok at Lasara Firefox Allen. They are a co-conspirator for collective liberation, and if you want to find out more, they have lots of links. Linktree, linktr.ee/Lasara Firefox Allen. So for the next about 20 minutes, we're going to be talking with Lasara, and Lasara is also going to be giving a talk at the Desire Summit on the future is genderqueer, and you do not want to miss that. So make sure you hit subscribe wherever you're watching this so you don't miss out on any of our upcoming interviews. Now we're going to jump right in. Lasara, before I get to your current practices and work, I want to go back and talk about what were you taught either in school or at home or from friends or the culture about gender growing up, and how have your views evolved and changed since then?
That's an awesome question, and so great to be here today. So, we all absorb so much like gender coding from culture.
I can't hear you. I don't know if it's me.
Can you hear me now?
One second. I just want to make sure. Okay, never mind. False alarm. Just me.
Okay. So I hope that you can hear me, Rachel, so that we can continue the conversation. I was saying that we all absorb so much gender coding and information from the culture around us. I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and so much of my gender reality was coded around feminism and how gender roles were being subverted by sort of the hippie background. Okay.
Sorry, I'm
okay. No worries.
Technical difficulty.
No worries.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, I'm gonna just do my best here. Okay. So, Lasara, can you now tell us how and why did you enter the sexuality and relationships field, and how has your work changed since you got started in that field?
So I want to say a little bit more about my sort of journey to get to where I am, and that is through sort of interacting with feminism and different arenas of gender identity, the queer community. Growing up, there was a lot of flexibility, but we didn't have the language that we have now around gender. And if I had the terminology for non-binary when I was younger, I certainly would have come to that identity sooner. As it was, I have identified as genderqueer for a very long time. And being genderqueer for me has meant that I did not abide within that binary stricture on gender expression or gender identity or how I experience gender. As far as my gender evolution goes, it's constant and ongoing. And to me, gender is relational, it's not static, it's fluid, and it continues being a process for me to arrive continually at my gender identity. And I think that if we had more freedom in our culture, or just in culture generally around the world, that folks would have a more fluid relationship with gender. I think gender is not a static thing, and it is um, so specific to culture. And so as culture shifts, gender expression shifts, right? We know that over time. And so for me, just being able to be present in the process of showing up to my gender expression and experience as it occurs is a big part of what it means to be genderqueer for me, and to be gender non-binary.
Okay, thank you. Can you tell us a little bit more about your book, Jailbreaking the Goddess, A Radical Revisioning of Feminist Spirituality? I'd love to know what the premise of the book is, who the target audience is, and I know you've been reading excerpts from it on social media. Can you tell me, maybe also about the reaction you've had to it so far?
Definitely. So Jailbreaking the Goddess came out in 2016. It was published by Llewellyn, and it's right here. I have a copy right here next to me. So this is Jailbreaking the Goddess, A Radical Revisioning of Feminist Spirituality. I have been reading sections of it on my TikTok, and the response has been great. The premise is that the maiden mother crone archetypal system, which is basically one of the sort of primary representations of the feminine divine in pagan and witchcraft communities, it's one of the first ones that a lot of people engage with or interact with, especially in witchcraft. My premise is that the triple goddess, the maiden mother crone archetypal system, is actually patriarchal in nature, and that the roots of the triple goddess are rooted in patriarchy. And the reason that I say that is because the triple goddess is rooted in our biology. So it's pre-menarche, menarche, post-menarche. So before someone starts bleeding, when they're bleeding, and after menopause. Being rooted in biology, that is one, exclusionary to folks who do not experience menstrual cycles. Two, it is rooted in our utility, in my opinion, to the service of procreation. And many of us are not defined by whether or not we are choosing to breed. So I just think that model is limited and archaic. And so the model that I offer in Jailbreaking the Goddess is a fivefold model that's not tied to our biology, is flexible, and is accessible by folks who don't have menstrual cycles. So one of the reasons that I wrote Jailbreaking the Goddess was in response to my own gender journey. I want to say too, though, that I wrote Jailbreaking the Goddess before I came out as non-binary. So Jailbreaking the Goddess is actually written from a feminist and female perspective. I'm still feminist, right, as a non-binary person, but Jailbreaking the Goddess is written from a very distinctly female space, with using the universal feminine as the vantage instead of the universal masculine, which is what a lot of books are written from. So I use she, her pronouns throughout. So that might feel alienating to some. And my next book will absolutely be written from a non-binary perspective. Yeah.
So I'd love to actually hear a little bit more about that, both what the divine feminine is, and also, how your gender journey has changed your perspective on the things you were writing about in the book, and talking about and thinking about, and any, I guess, practical advice you have for other people who are also, I think I was going to say non-binary people, but I think part of the issue is that we sometimes think it's only non-binary people who are grappling with this. And I think it's all of us, or should be all of us, maybe grappling is not the right word because I don't mean it's a problem, but learning about this. And I think it's something that a lot of people, I mean, I speak for myself as someone who's cisgender, like instinctively, if they don't understand it, some people just reject it out of hand and say, well, I don't understand this. This is not how I grew up. This is not what I learned. You know, I don't know how to incorporate it into my daily life. And I think people would welcome sort of simple ways to just start thinking about it and expanding their understanding so that they can be respectful of all genders.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree that it is complex for many people. I think that we can start with the basics and just say that a they them pronoun is really challenging for a lot of folks. Folks have like resistance to using what people contextualize as a multiple pronoun for one person. There are so many ways to overcome that basic block. And one of the ways that I recommend is just by practicing. So if someone's pronoun is they them, and a person ends up misgendering that person, apologize and correct yourself. It's that simple. And that's the basic element of support that we can offer to each other is I've seen a lot of memes recently that say things like, if my given name is Steven and I go by Steve, no one bats an eye. But if I, change my name from Stephen to Stephanie, people are like, I can't do that. What is the block? Obviously, it's not just a memory thing. However, there is a component of memory that will help with this process. One of the things that I really recommend to folks is when we are misgendering folks, it's often because it's generally always because we aren't thinking of the person as the gender that they are, experiencing life as. And so when I misgender someone, because I still do it, we're all fallible, right? So if I misgender someone, I will correct myself in my head. I will give myself 3 examples. I will say, they went to the store today. They are a beautiful person. They are one of my good friends, right? And then that helps me to contextualize within my consciousness that person's pronoun. So that's just an easy technique. I want to bounce back sort of to the question of the feminine divine or the feminal divine, and just say that I think that in as far as spirituality goes. If folks are engaging with the feminine divine, there are many ways to engage with the divine as a non-gendered entity or being or power, and that's where I usually go to at this point in my life is that deity or universal energy exists beyond our interpretations of gender or beyond our need or necessity to define the divine as a gender. So that's where I go to these days and have for a very long time. I think it is important too to have feminine and feminine representations of the divine to balance out this sort of mass culture, dominant culture, monotheism that is so skewed toward the masculine as far as the divine goes. So I think it's very important that we do contextualize the divine as feminine as well. And so I think all of the above is helpful in our evolution. I want to bounce back to Rachel. You asked me about how I got into teaching about sex and sexuality. And I want to bounce back to that, and because I skipped over that. So I want to just say the main impetus that I had for getting involved with teaching about sexuality was the AIDS HIV crisis. And that when I was in my, when I was coming of age sexually, the AIDS crisis was looming large, was that I came into my sexuality as the AIDS crisis began, and I lost many people to AIDS, and I actually worked in the community giving support to folks who were in active end stage AIDS, and so that was a huge part of my desire to offer out to my community safer sex techniques, and that's and just a consciousness around safer sex as a possibility. I felt very alienated by sexuality in general, and afraid of it, because I grew up under the sex equals death banner. And so my offering of safer sex information to my community was an offering to myself too, to say we can still enjoy our lives, we can still celebrate each other and our sexuality. I grew up in a pretty sex positive environment, and so it was very conflicting to have that the intensity of the AIDS crisis being so central to my experience of sexuality. So being able to offer to my community safer sex techniques was a huge part of my awakening as a sex educator.
Sorry, I'm having a few technical difficulties, everyone, so I'm in a little bit of a delay. Okay, so thank you for that. I mean, there's lots more. I could be talking to you for an hour, because that brought up so many questions that I hope people will ask you at the summit. So as we get to that, I want to know more about the title of your talk is "The Future is Genderqueer." And I love that title. I assume it's a play on "The Future is Female," but I would love to hear more about what you think that means, and kind of a preview of what we're going to hear, and how you see gender queerness impacting, I guess, all of the culture, really. And I mean, both around sexuality and gender, but also maybe in other arenas.
Yeah, thank you for that question. The future is genderqueer, in my opinion. The future is genderqueer. We are, I look to my kids' generation. My kids are 23 and almost 26, and I look to my kids' generation and see so much, rapid evolution around sex and gender identity, and around sexual orientation, and the process of finding the right label, and then also the process of, for some folks, of not wanting any labels at all, and just being in the experience of flexibility. I think that our generation that's upcoming, our generations that are upcoming, are so much more fluid around consciousness of gender identity and gender awareness. So I really think that that is the next wave. And when I see the future is female, I think yes, and right. The future is female. There is a necessity for female and feminine power to take more room in our social consciousness. I believe also that moving beyond the binary is going to be part of the next wave of our social and cultural evolution. I believe it's already here, and that if we look to future generations and gender identity and expression and experience, then we see that shift occurring. I think it is. So one of the things that my talk is going to be about is about the intersection between sexual identity and sexual responsiveness, and gender identity and gender experience. And so I'm going to be talking about gender identity. I'm going to be talking about where, for me, in my experience, where and how my gender fluidity affects my my sexual sort of engagement, and how we can be respectful in our relationships to folks who are genderqueer and gender fluid, or gender fluid, and how we can show up to that experience. And it's, honestly, they're tools that are applicable to any relationship. We show up with respect, we show up in the moment, we show up in the experience of this moment. We don't take consent for granted, right? And so being aware that someone's gender identity and how I might be experiencing my gender can affect how I'm experiencing my sexual orientation. I know that's not true for every genderqueer person, but it is true for me. And I haven't heard a lot of conversation about that yet. So I'm excited to have that conversation with my community.
I think that's really interesting, especially because as you were talking, I was thinking about the fact that for a lot of people, they might think, well, I'm not questioning my gender identity. And that may be true, but you might not be questioning it today, but you might in 5 or 10 years, and your partner or partners might, and you might not see that coming, or they might not see that coming. You don't always know. And then I did want to piggyback. I forgot to say onto your earlier question about practicing. I'm pretty sure I got this from Busy Phillips, the actress whose a teenager, Birdie, is non-binary. And I think on her Busy's podcast, she said something about her and her now ex-husband, but like practicing when their child is out of the room, like when they're not in front of them, but she, like you said, to themselves, saying they're going to the movies, they're doing this, and normalizing it in their own heads first, so that it is second nature. Almost like when you're speaking another language and you either translate it into, like, say it's Spanish, like you do the translation in your head, but then eventually you get fluent and can speak that. So okay,
Yes, absolutely.
We are going to wrap up. I would love to know what you're working on next. I know you have some live events. Can you tell us about what those are, where people can find you and find out about them? And then obviously, everyone, please come hear Lasara talk either in person in Los Angeles or watch live streamed February 11th on The Future is Genderqueer. I know I'm really eager to hear what else you have to say, because I think that's a very interesting topic. And often, at least the things I see online, they're talking about either gender or sexual orientation or sexuality, but not necessarily all of those combined. So everyone watching, go to summit.resonance11.com to learn more about the Desire Summit on February 11th and to get tickets. And now I'd love to hear what you're working on next.
So I'm working on another book. I have a couple publishers looking at it right now, and the theme is basically, it's a departure from what I've done before, but the theme is basically how gaining success. So it's kind of a success book for anti-capitalists, and it's about how gaining success can help us to shift culture. And it's an interesting one. So that's what I'm working on at this point in my life. And I have a couple workshops coming up, one in person in San Francisco in March and one online on April 1st. And that workshop is called Success Magics. And I am posting on TikTok regularly about my previous work, about Jailbreaking the Goddess primarily, but also about life in general. And I'm active on Instagram, sharing out my information there as well. So if people want to find out more about what I'm doing, and as things shift and become available, like crossing fingers, but as soon as I get a book deal, y'all will hear about it. And that the best place to keep track of me is at my Linktree. So that's Linktree/Lasara Firefox Allen. I also offer coaching, and that's a big part of what I do. So those, those resources are also available at my Linktree.
Thank you so much. And everyone, please join us February 11th, Desire Summit, summit.resonance11.com.
Thank you so much, Rachel. It's been a pleasure to talk with you today.